To have you. It's a happy Wednesday. It's cold in Texas. Winter is arriving. Is it cold in Salt Lake City, Patrick?
Yeah, it's been that way for a bit. All good. Beautiful fall.
Yep, that is what happens. So super glad to see some names. Michelle Boyer, good to see you. Janet, as always, thanks for joining. We intended to have this meeting be a meeting instead of a webinar, but that didn't happen. So we are just going to continue on with our webinar format for this month. And we'll have cameras on and ready next month. So hopefully nobody spent too much time getting ready for camera today. Mr. Tom Young, always glad to see your name. Bobby Matei, how's it going? Is it cold in Louisiana yet? So let's put, we need some chat box liveliness. I want the temperature in your location. What's the temperature? Todd, do you know what ours is?
I don't. It's probably, I don't know. What was it supposed to be today? 50? 45?
It was like 30 or something.
I don't think so.
54 here.
54. Todd is one of those people that usually can look outside and guess at the temperature and be within 2 or 3 degrees.
Now that's intuitiveness or intuition.
Yep. That's serious skill.
It's 50.
I was talking just as it's just top of the hour. So just another moment while we're getting going here. I was talking with a guy that lives in New York yesterday, and it was clearly dark. It was, I think, my 5 o'clock meeting, and this was towards the end of it. So it's close to 7 o'clock in New York, and he's outside and he can't get his, it was a thumb or an iPhone thing, or I'm not sure what the problem was, but he couldn't make it work to get into his office. He said, I'm freezing. I can't think. I've got to get in. I can't get in. It's not working. Just give me a minute here. I felt bad for him. There's nothing I could do to help other than shut up, right? Sometimes silence is the key. All right. So it's just a moment after the hour. I'm Kim Butler. For those of you that are new to the crowd, we're super grateful for you. Happy to have you. I'm actually looking for Lisa's name. Janet Sims and I had a awesome conversation with a gal that's just going to join our community. And it was so fun to hear her commentary because she learned about the insurance space, got into the UL versus whole life part just a little bit, figured it out as a consumer, and then wanted to help people from the advisor side. And so it was really neat to listen to her. And I had one of those moments, talk about silence, where she was talking and I wanted to jump, right? It's like, oh, I want to talk about this to help you with this UL whole life thing. But I just chose to be quiet. And as she layered on the sentences, it was clear she'd already figured it out herself. So it was just a really good reminder to me. Sometimes the zipping of the lips is the best thing to do. All right. So as we begin, I want to share a gift that Patrick gave Todd and I, a book called Courage is Calling by Ryan Holiday. Patrick, how do you know him?
Well, yeah, Ryan's written a number of books. He's really the individual that has popularized stoicism. I think there's definitions of what stoic means, but really from the ancient sense, there the philosophies, whether it's Marcus Aurelius, which is probably the most famous Stoic, but there's many others. Ryan really brought those principles to light through a couple of books. Ego is the Enemy, Obstacle is the Way, Stillness is the Key. He has a book called The Daily Stoic, and a bunch of others. So this is his most recent one. It's going to be part of, I believe, a 4-part kind of series, right, that goes through the primary virtues of Stoicism, and courage is the first one. Temperance is the next.
So I want to share just a quick read out of the courage one, which is interesting because it's I had picked this last night of what to share. And it's exactly the opposite of what I was just saying in terms of the importance of silence. So we've talked a lot about frameworks. We're going to continue to talk about frameworks. This is a good example of them where you have what appear to be opposites. Like I'm suggesting that we work on silence in our meetings, zipping our lips, like letting people talk. And at the same time, clear on the other side of that from the book, you can't be afraid to ask. So it's a couple pages. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to try to summarize, but I do want to read a couple of the sentences. Frontline responders know that their duty is to rush toward the bang while others run away. Are you afraid? And then he talks some about the Stoics. Don't be ashamed to need help, Marcus Aurelius wrote. Like a soldier storming a wall, you have a mission to accomplish. And if you've been wounded and need a comrade to pull you up, so what? Exactly, so what? You're looking for a hand, not a handout. And so it goes on, but I think that's such an instructive guidance for this community. And when we talk about our community, this prosperity economics movement, and specifically you all, the prosperity economics advisors, we're there to provide that hand. Not just me and Todd and Patrick and Vince and John and Janet and Elizabeth and others that you would list in the quote leadership space, but each one of you to provide a hand to each other. And that sense of community, we're going to continue to work on building more and more and more. So I would love to have a few of you put in the chat box, I'm in, and here is my guidance. For those that feel like they have something to give, I'd like you to put I'm in. Some of you are new. You're still here looking to receive, and that's awesome. We need you too. But Janet is looking for some of the more experienced advisors that have a little bit of space and time to provide that hand in the form of mentorship for our community that we're working and percolating on in a little bit more formal way. And so way to go, Mark Bertrand. Thank you much. There is, and it's going too fast, I can't see the names. There is some space there that will be really, really valuable as we progress, and it will get more formalized. So we've got our universal membership. That's a great start. We've got the Evolve membership. That's continuation. The Evolve membership includes the universal. And then beyond that, we'll be developing a more formal mentorship program that Janet is working on right now. So Tom, thank you. Jaime, much appreciation to you. There's going to be lots of good here.
Here, Kim, I'll put a capstone on what you mentioned. First off, this is a good book. This just barely came out. It's on Audible. You can get it on Amazon. You can buy it from Ryan directly. But this kind of plays into what we're going to talk about today on the webinar. But I had a business coach for about 3 years. Is a client of mine as well. And he actually introduced Ryan to Stoicism. But Matt, he told me something. He told me a story, right, that really illustrates the idea of Stoicism and courage. I think you first have to just, I would say, step back and realize, the miracle that we step into every day. If you look at what it took for you and your spouse to meet, if you're married, what it took for your parents and their parents to meet. If you look at, going back generations and generations, all these things have had to happen in order for us to be where we are right now and to be alive. And I think what is being taught by Stoicism is that it's not by happenstance. There's some sort of like design around it. And what you experience today, what you experience tomorrow, there are moments, right, that are meant for you, moments that you're meant to show up in. And it could be someone passing you on the road. It could be passing on the in a hall. You don't know, but the awareness of the people you meet, the things you do, especially what you consider coincidences, okay, consider them by design, and commit and consider that you're meant to show up for whatever the case may be. And this goes back to Matt and that story where he was in Argentina visiting a friend, and he was getting coffee at a coffee shop, and he heard this ruckus behind the building, and a bunch of teenagers were beating up on this older guy and trying to steal his money. And Matt, again, he used to believes this to the core, but he went around and fought them all off. Right. And it's just an example of he's not a natural fighter. He's a big, strong guy. But again, he looks at his life and the circumstances of his life as being by design, and being willing to exercise courage, especially in those moments. And that's what Ryan illustrates in the book. Is it's not necessarily that courage is something that's calling all the time, but when it does, will you show up and will you answer the call? I mean, I think that's the overarching theme of it.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we just came off of the summit. Many of you were with us last week. Fabulous 3 days. Our role today is going to hit 3 specific highlights for you. So for those of you that weren't there, we're going to give you 3 specific takeaways, one from each of us that we loved. And then for those of you that were there, you'll just have a good reminder, and we're going to set the lay of the land for what the webinars are going to be for the next 12 months. We're actually getting ahead of our schedule finally. Janet Sims said it well, this train is moving. And so we finally got out there in front of it and have a specific list of products and strategies that we will be covering for the next 12 months. And we're going to shift the format of this so that it's a Zoom meeting instead of a Zoom webinar, so that all of your pictures are on and we can engage a little bit better. More importantly, this list of products and strategies are what the prosperity economics movement espouses. They're part of that full service practice, or that holistic practice that we've talked about. And we're going to be providing you with the experts that have the space handled. So whether it's car and home insurance as an example, or disability insurance, or whatever it is. So we've got a list of products, and we'll work on those the first half of the year. Then the second half of the year, we'll be working on the list of strategies. And this is going to be a little bit more case study in alignment that will be easier to accomplish when we have a central way to look at personal financial data. So Patrick, if you want to update us on that, you can do it at the end of our time together today. And maybe you don't have an update yet, which is fine. What I'd like to start with, though, is Todd's takeaway from the summit. So we had 15 speakers. They were all in a particular area of expertise. It was approximately 2 per area. And each one of us have chosen our favorite with the very specific info. And then Elizabeth has to put in the chat box that speaker's name, contact information. And so you'll have some real meat to be able to take away. This group of speakers were all people that either Todd or Patrick or I, or sometimes all of us, have worked with, some of them for 20, 25 years. And they all work virtually and United States wide. I know we've got some Canadians included, and we'll do a better job of mixing in some experts in that literal country as we progress forward. But for now, at least we've got people for you that work in all 50 states in most cases. Doesn't mean that you have to switch to them. You may have your own experts in these areas that are loosely connected with the personal finance space, but not directly yours to handle. Awesome. Please keep your own experts. These are just ones. If you don't have one, or you feel like you want a second one, which is sometimes valuable, that you're able to do that. So Todd, why don't you start? Who was your favorite? Very specifically, what did you learn from them?
So directly to what's being learned, I'll talk about that first, and then also some bigger picture stuff too. But from Darren Miller, just you know, he talked about the property and casualty side. He handles that nationwide, and like anything, if we're experts in our field, it's difficult to be experts in all these other areas. And yet, in order to do the best possible job for our clients, we need to make sure all these other areas are covered. Because, like with the property and casualty, while we may put the life insurance in place and other financial tools in place and strategies, if the property and casualty, as an example, isn't taken care of, then one thing could wipe out everything we've done on the other side. So all of that, while we see it as, well, that's not really our job, it really is our job if we're going to also add the certainty to what it is we're talking to our clients about. And so one of the big pieces from Darren that I had just completely dropped the ball on, and that was under the liability umbrella portion. And I looked at the liability umbrella as a critical piece from the liability side. What I had forgotten about or put aside or didn't listen well to in the past is the underinsured or uninsured protection that we get from our liability policy. And that's a huge piece that I have left out in the past. And so what that really means is, we have a $5 million liability policy as an example, and we look at it as, okay, that's going to go on top of our car insurance in case we hit somebody and really do some damage, and it extends beyond that. I know I've got the insurance company between me and lawsuit and that kind of thing. But the bigger picture is, what happens if somebody else hits me and causes a huge amount of damage to my property or person, and they don't have any insurance? Well, we know most people do that on their automobile insurance, they've got some coverage there. But what if it exceeds that? And that's where actually our liability policy kicks in. So our personal liability policy actually protects us in that event with the underinsured piece, if it's in place properly. And so that was a big takeaway from me for what Darren was talking about, just that bigger piece. But I think the bigger lesson that I learned from Darren was outside of the pure product piece, and that was his command of his talk and the realization of his confidence in what he knew, to the point that he basically is willing to help other P&C advisors do the right thing for our clients, even though he's not going to get a piece of that, because he knows he's one of the best in the fields, and he's really not concerned with the competition. He's confident enough to do what's right and to walk away from a deal if the client's not willing to do what really needs to be done. And I think that's something that we really need to look at for our own practices, is just the importance of, if we're confident in what we do, then we shouldn't be afraid to share it with anybody. Okay, it's going to come back to us. It's gonna pay back in other areas. So really, that was a huge piece that I got from Darren.
Todd, go ahead and share also Mike Liu's story about "You Don't Need This."
Yeah, so something that I was talking to an advisor that's been a long-term friend as well in Canada, and one of the things, some of the insurance companies have been talking to him about, is this an appropriate amount of insurance or that kind of thing, and they always battle that as to, how much is too much, what do they really need. And one of the things Mike said, he said, this is something I tell to my clients, is you don't need anything that I'm about to tell you, right? People can survive without what I'm going to tell you to do. You can live on the street, you can do other things. The difference is, you want what I have to show you. You want this amount because of what it will do for you. But this idea that you need it and you need to talk to me and you have to, it's not true. It's really, we can survive without that information. But Do we want to survive or do we want to thrive? So really everything that we're doing is about wants, isn't it?
Way to go, Mike, another Canadian, right? So, Patrick, what was your fave and the learning? And then Elizabeth will pop in the specifics.
Well, I'll echo a few things that Todd said, and then I'll speak to one of my favorite speakers, and I'm still learning more about this specific niche because it is new. But first, I would say, as we've defined the role of an advisor, it's the idea of mastery is interesting because mastery in the macro advising space, okay, where you act as the advisor over a breadth of different goals that clients have, milestones they want to hit, as well as helping to prevent obstacles along the way. We could list off all the, I would say, elements of proficiency that you're going to have, whether it's, mortgage financing, real estate, business, asset protection, estate planning, long-term care, disability, P&C, health insurance. You also look at college planning, college strategy, business succession. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so being a master in those areas, I don't know if it's reasonable. If it is reasonable, you're limited to how many people you can work with. And so I look at, again, the role of a prosperity economics advisor. It's not necessarily to have mastery in all those areas. I think there's some core products and strategies to have mastery in, which your business revolves around that. At the same time, it's becoming a master at relationship. The nature of our, I would say, core products and strategies develop a relationship for life. And so if anything, mastering relationship, I would say, is bread and butter of a prosperity economics advisor. Now, with that being said, as you foster and develop the relationship over time, you essentially act, Chris Torme, specified this, which I think is a really good representation of what we want to become as an advisor. We're the 411 and the 911. At the same time, as we foster relationships, we want to proactively be speaking, educating our clients and subsequently directing them, because just as much as our knowledge change, the scope of our network changes, their lives change, and what might have not been relevant 5 years ago may be relevant today. So this is where, again, the understanding of a macro, big picture, full service finance advisor is really understanding all the different elements that comprise the space, and then being able to look out for clients. And so I'm not going to specifics other than my favorite speakers. So Lee, is it Ponziker?
Cancer.
Yeah, so he's new, right? And he brought up something that I, as much as I tell myself I'm in touch and in tune with, the evolution of society, right? It's going at a pretty fast pace. I'm not sure if anyone got the chance to watch Mark Zuckerberg's 1 hour explanation of the metaverse. I mean, it's fascinating where things are going and how quickly they're going there. And what Lee brought up is there is a huge vulnerability in the digital space. That vulnerability, an example is cryptocurrency, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum, and regardless of what your opinion is, you're going to have clients that have assets there. And so understanding really how to, number one, protect those assets, but also as an advisor, make sure that usually the primary person who is leading the charge financially in the family, okay, has the right succession in place so that assets are not lost. He used an example of, I think there's like $50 to $75 million. And just one example, there's a few of these types of examples where essentially the password to what protected, where the encryption was and how to access the Bitcoin, right, was lost. And they've tried 8 attempts, just the password. They've tried 8 attempts. They have 10 totals. They have 2 more attempts, or else it's lost indefinitely. Right. You also have, something as simple as a code to a safe. You have something as simple as, where's your will and trust located? You have things like, logins to bank accounts. You also have executed estate planning, which is, all right, is the bank account beneficiary in the name of the trust? Was that actually executed? Okay, retirement accounts, life insurance, all sorts of assets, right? If it's not executed, then the nightmare stories are a mile high of trying to access those assets, and let alone where the assets are in the first place. And that's something, I think all of us can sympathize, or at least empathize with, or empathize, at least sympathize with, where, it's a treasure hunt. I pulled up a website maybe 4 or 5 years ago of an asset that my grandfather had that was on one of those like state lists of unclaimed property, and he died in 1997. So you look at really what a family goes through, to understand where assets are, especially in the event of something that is not planned, an accident, something that wasn't foreseen. Lee just has essentially a business where you're able to start organizing a lot of the digital asset space, which leads into the traditional asset space, so that people are organized. Because these days life is getting really complicated. A myriad of passwords, changing passwords, dual factor authentication. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. So really, I would say something, as far as we're concerned, as we associate our primary products and services to something, and strategies to something that's beneficial to someone, there are criteria, to those benefits. There are conditions to those benefits. And understanding those conditions, I think, are vital, because the end result is we want people to experience a benefit from what we set up. At the same time, if a password is in the way, if a location, if a beneficiary change is in the way, it puts us in a pickle. And by the time benefits of our services and strategies are to be experienced, and there are, there's frustration, there's loss of this, lack of understanding here, it puts it by everything we've worked toward in jeopardy, in a sense. And so Lee, being part of the strategic network, I think companies and services like these will be more prevalent as things go on, but he's definitely someone to follow. And there's a few other services. I think Everplans is one that I use until we have our own solution, right? Where you're able to kind of organize things in a way that allow people to pass on information, store information, keep it updated, so that in the event that something happened, there's an appointed beneficiary of that information. So for instance, let's imagine my grandfather. He had all passwords. He had, my will's here, the code to the safe is here, my keys are here, the insurance guy is here, the finance guy is here, my bank account is here. Wills and trusts, everything, beneficiaries all set up, good to go. He passes away. My Uncle Bobby gets an email that says, here's your login to this Everplans platform, and here is everything for grandpa, or his, in this case, his dad. Does that make sense? So it's like one of those things where, now, do you have to master that? No, you just have to have someone that is competent, that you can, I would say personally use yourself, and then be able to refer and introduce clients to. That's the nature of a strategic network. And then I'll just segue into another one, which I'll be brief on this one, which is Sheldon Decker. Sheldon was one of the first guys I met when I moved to Utah. We've kept in touch over the years, but he moved into a kind of a comprehensive insurance company called Morton, and I had a officers and directors policy there, errors and omissions policy there. I have a cybersecurity policy with them. Sheldon was not my representative, but my representative moved on to another company, and Sheldon took over my account and was like, "Hey, man!" So we've been in contact for a long time. But the business insurance space is important to me. I've had the opportunity of just getting to know lots of clients and very unique situations. There are some, the lessons I learned the most are the nightmare stories. The stories when, a client's brother-in-law gives him this, provision of their purchase agreement when they bought it from my client's dad. and the other partner was the brother-in-law, married the sister, where he said, you have 30 days to come up with, $25 million or else I'm taking over the business, right? It's like provisions of a contract. It's like, when people are going into a business, they don't necessarily, look to succession and, exit strategy, right? So again, it's one of those, like with Sheldon and Morton, they review contracts, they review, business arrangements, partnerships. They provide, a breadth of insurance services. I mentioned a few, cybersecurity. We had a run-in with some hacker a few years ago. Luckily, we caught it in time, but they falsified a policy loan document and was able to essentially get money transferred from an insurance company to an account that was not the policy owners. And we caught it in time, but we didn't realize the depth of cybersecurity law that exists in our state and other states. And so anyone that could have potentially been compromised by this threat, we had to do about, I would say, between $250,000 and $400,000 worth of really deep audit of our services, our systems to be compliant, and our cybersecurity policy paid for the whole thing. They actually supplied the team for us. So it's just one of those things where it's a new type of insurance, it's a new type of protection. It may not be for everybody, but there are certain businesses that are going under because of it. I know a hospital that was compromised and had to come up with 7 figures of Bitcoin. We saw with, I think it was the natural gas grid in some parts of, I think, Texas and other places who got hacked. Todd, you know about that, right? And they had to, it would have been a disaster, okay? So this is, there's a threat level that exists that most people are just not aware of. And so really understanding, okay, is my client's business, is their, email list, is it at risk? And is there something I can do to help them protect that risk? Because again, if you go bankrupt because, a hacker, pushes you out of your server and you have no access to data, what good, right, is a life insurance policy, right, beyond a certain point, right? What good is cash? What good is an investment? What good is it, right, if that threat wipes you out? So my point is, it's like there's lots of things to be concerned with. And so understanding really where the risk levels exist in society today allows you to be a better macro advisor, full service advisor. And, those are just a few examples of that. So, okay.
Super cool.
I'm done.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm grateful that you shared not one, but 2 of your favorites of the 15. And I want to clarify some of the questions that I was watching in the chat box. So Lee Pazkanzer's company, which is protectmyplans.com, that Elizabeth put the link in there for you, works both in Canada and in the US and does not take over your passwords. I think that's a really important distinction. Furthermore, Patrick used the example of Bitcoin, which we all acknowledge as a digital asset. Lee defines a digital asset as anything that has a username and a password. And so think about your phone, your photos on your phone, and Lee's got story upon story of family photos that were tied up in courts for 2 and 3 years because they didn't have the proper system to get them to the next generation. Whereas using his system, and we're not connected to any of these companies in any way, but using his system can get it done in 60 to 90 days. And he said, even your 80-year-old grandma has on average 20 digital assets. And we've talked about it before on this webinar, but if you haven't checked that out, it's a really worthwhile space. And I want to clarify the difference between it and something like the torch. So the torch was actually created by a friend of mine and Todd's and is also super valuable. And Patrick kind of hinted at this. It's for things like, where are the car keys? Where is the dog food? Who is the vet for the dog? Those kinds of things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And yet, if you don't think about them, somebody could really be left in the lurch. And Lenore, the creator of the torch, tells a story. She does not have children. Her sister had kids, was heading off on a trip to Europe, and is like, hey, just so you'll know, we just got a will done. So before we go on this trip, and I listed you as executor. Bye. And Lenore was like, what? Holy cow. What do I do if the kids need to go to the doctor? Or I don't know any of that stuff about your family and your life and what needs to happen. So over the course of the next couple of days, Lenore is a crazy organizer. And she just thought through all the stuff like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And so that's what the torch is. So I would say, consider both, look at both. Tom Young, I seriously appreciate your request. And somebody was like, we need planning tools for our planning tools. We are going to continue to work at narrowing the scope of the information that we share with you guys and hanging it on a framework so that you can place it, locate it, learn it, use it, or choose to say no, because not everything that we bring forth is a good match for you. And so it's okay to choose to say no. It's okay to raise your hand and say, I need help. And we will continue to work on doing a better job of narrowing the flow of information and then giving you a framework to hang it on so that it has a place and you know where it fits in with all the pieces and the parts. So again, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I also think that what you're talking about really illustrates the reason to have outside people help with the network is because we can't do all those things. And yet all those things need to be done. And so it's one of those things, my gosh, which tool do I go to? What do how do I get my client through this? There are things where you're going to have to say, no, I can't do it, but it has to be done. So how do we do that? And we do that with the network of people that we know and can trust and will support our business rather than taking our business.
Yep. So Elizabeth, I'm going to give you a little hint. Do we have a PEA version or a PE version? I think we have a PE version of Prepare for Death Day preparation. What Janet is saying, this is an okay thing to bring up. And our society needs to get past the stigma of talking about money. And our society also needs to get past the stigma of talking about death. It's not morbid to talk about death. Get it prepared for and get it off your list so it's not hanging out in the background bothering you. And so if Elizabeth has a chance to find that, that'd be awesome. We did a fun little post on it. So moving us along, my favorite was the speaker that shared, and I want to make sure I've got my info right, the information about indexed annuities. So Elizabeth will put some information in there on the chat box, 2 specific, very valuable websites about fixed indexed annuities that I will admit I did not have a lot of background on. And so Brian McCloskey is a member of our community, and he was the one, you could call him a field speaker, that we had. All of the others were more, I guess, in the expert category. Brian brought some information to the table that was valuable in terms of guaranteeing income. And we all know that there's a lot of chatter out on the web right now of the life insurance creating the guaranteed income. And yet those of us that have been through lots of training, used life insurance for many, many years, know that the life insurance is really best kept on the books, in force, used as the last asset, not as the first asset. And we know that tax-free income commentary sounds interesting, sounds exciting, sounds valuable. But holy cow, what an example of the tax tail wagging the financial dog. And what a disservice we're doing to our clients if we look at the life insurance for the first source of income in retirement or financial independence or financial freedom or whatever you want to call it. I know it's a nice sound bite, but Todd, what's your thing? You can tell a lie in a sentence, but a truth What's that line?
Yeah, something like that. You can tell a lie in one sentence, but it takes a whole paragraph to tell the truth.
Yes.
A lie travels all the way around the world before the truth has a chance to get out the door. I'm kidding.
Both accurate. So this area of using annuities to create guaranteed for life income while partially taxable is, I think, something that we all need to do a better job learning about and not fall prey to the, oh, you can just use your life insurance and get tax-free income. And then, oh my gosh, what do you do about this huge loan that you have on the books because you borrowed against your cash value to create that tax-free income? And now you're living longer and longer. And I meant to bring this up earlier. Elizabeth, maybe you can find our 87 is the new 65 link. Todd hinted at it. People living so much longer these days, people finally becoming aware that they're living so much longer. Todd and Elizabeth did the math, and age 65 really should be age 87. And I know in our family, we, on both Todd's side and my side, we have people in their 80s still working every day. And that goes along with that tax-free quest. But when we realize that what is more important is guaranteed lifetime income, again, back to Brian's presentation, versus the tax-free part of it, which sounds good, but is not sustainable. That learning is something that I know I need to do a better job of. So in light of that, I want to give us a sense of what the 2022 summits are going to be from a content standpoint. But I want to just pause and see if Todd or Patrick has anything to add before I launch into the future. We're good. Todd?
No, I'm good.
Okay, beautiful. So to give you a sense of what the next year is going to bring, our monthly webinars are going to, I said this at the beginning, but just to restate, are going to spend the first 6 months or so on products and the next 6 months or so on strategy. So I've got myself a little list. These are all things that you know the products and the strategies. We'll put that on the website in the future so that you get a sense of what webinar is going to be covering what thing. And we'll be able to do a deep dive on the product side and the strategy side. Strategies are more about what you do. Products are more about what you buy. So that's the webinar landscape. First Wednesday of the month, 1:00 Central. Same thing that you've been getting used to. Only shift is we'll make the Zoom platform be a meeting instead of a webinar so that we can see your faces and you can engage with us a little bit better. And then the summit schedule is going to continue on our February, June, October pace. And so, Patrick, do you want to talk for a moment about the importance of a rhythm, a business rhythm or pace?
Oh man, that would take the next 20 minutes. No, I would
talk fast.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, again, it's the nature of people, right? So having habits, having routines is both good, but also bad, right? It's one of those paradoxes because typically new information does not become part of us and we don't really use it. We get a lot of it, but we don't really change behavior. Our behavior right now, not much has changed since yesterday, since a week before. There's certain kind of things that, kind of push us out of our comfort zone, push us into a new habit. And there's also consistency around doing certain things. I think it's 60 days before a new habit is developed, doing something consistently for that long. So the idea of a business rhythm, right, is a consistent way in which you're getting new results. So it starts with goal setting, and then it starts with plans of action around getting those goals met. And then there's follow-ups and check-ins and KPIs and objective measurements. So there's a business rhythm that we use that's on a 4-month cycle, right, where goals and objectives are set every cycle, or initiatives, and then projects and so forth are dedicated budget and money to, and bonus and performance compensation around. So we're kind of using that same thing with regards to summit, because every summit, the idea is to walk away with 3 things that you can implement over the subsequent 4 months. Because I mean, especially this last time, there were probably 50 things that people took that could have taken away from the presenters. It's not reasonable to try to institute all 50 things. If you try to do that, you're likely to give up after a week and not do any of them. So the idea is to find 1, 2, 3 things that you can put a strategy around and ultimately make part of your practice over the corresponding 4 months. So that's the nature of a business rhythm.
Awesome. So Strategic Coach has done this for years. It has its every 90 days. We're doing ours trimesterly. And so February, June, and October are going to want to become a part of your landscape for 2022 and beyond. And if you'll get yourself on that business rhythm, and the reason I lengthened it a little bit for our community is because life insurance takes so long to get approved. So I thought a 4-month time frame would be better than a 3-month time frame. Nevertheless, just getting on that path. And some of the things that we hear inside our community about truth training, Todd's 3-day all-in calculator school, and also about the summit that is more on the conceptual side is I've been there. I've already done that. So I ask you, what makes somebody like Tom Young, Mark Bertrand, Patrick Donahoe, Garrett Gunderson, and a whole bunch of other people that are here with us today come, attend, be engaged, ideally cameras on when we switch the meeting style, over and over and over again? What makes them? Why did they do that? And I know I did it myself. And the only reason I can think of is that they have adopted that beginner's mind that lets them realize that even if they think they've heard it before, they need to hear it again, and they'll benefit from hearing it again. And sometimes
it also goes to the nature of conditioning, right? Where and habit and routine. This is professional athletes, right? They're masters at their craft, but they practice daily. It's their profession, right? They train daily only to perform, a handful of times a week, right? For a couple of hours, if that. So the idea is, training and conditioning, I don't think is really part of the normal person, because people, I think, are conditioned to be told what to do. But I think in this profession, right, mastering what we have to master and the speed at which things are evolving, it's constant training. And that's where truth training, learning that software, math, the principles of math aren't going to change. Okay. The way in which it's applied is going to. And so that application evolution, it's all over the place. And so that's where you really, I would say once a year isn't even enough. I would say multiple times a year is typically good conditioning, even for someone that's been, doing this for a couple of decades. Yeah. Because things are evolving so much quicker than before.
So our February summit is going to be different than we've done in the past. And we have a real treat in that Vince Dodona is going to share his entire 2-day training. So Todd, will you talk a little bit about what I realize this exact 2-day training you haven't sat through, but you have sat through numerous 2- and 3-day trainings with Vince. Talk a little bit about what that's like.
It goes back to exactly what you were saying earlier about, I've already done that. Yeah, but there's a couple of things that happen. One thing is maybe things are said just a little bit differently so that they resonate better. But more than that, even if it's the same thing, what happens is you hear one thing, and based on where you are and your level of knowledge and understanding and other things at that time, it means a certain thing. Well, you chew on that for a few months, a year, whatever the time frame is. And now when you hear it again, it has a deeper, more meaningful piece, or maybe you even discarded it because it didn't really make sense until you attain enough knowledge in between there for it to make sense. So that repetition and actually larger piece of 2 days of that kind of information is just, what a gift. I I am so looking forward to that part. And I think part of it too is put in application. Kim, you and I just a little while ago talked about the story of the talents and in the Bible. And I think that's such a critical piece. And I think we really need to look at our practices and our knowledge and other things that way. And it's, if we take those gifts, those nuggets, and use them, that is going to make Vince happy. That's going to make everybody happy and want to share even that much more, right? But when we just listen to that and we don't do anything with it, it's going to be taken away.
Yep. Yep. So we have February 20. I should get the dates, and Elizabeth can pop them in the chat just so that you hear them, see them, dial them in on your calendar. February 24th and 25th reserved. And it's a virtual event. There's a chance that there will be some opportunity for a few of you to attend live in Salt Lake City. So Vince Dodona, if you don't know him, 40 years in the business, a gifted, skilled life insurance salesperson, estate planner extraordinaire, knows more than a lot of estate planning attorneys, and has spent the last 15 years studying human beings and how they get results. And so he splits his time between New York and Las Vegas, and he'll come down to Salt Lake City where Patrick's office is. And so again, there's an opportunity potentially for live, but for sure you'll want to reserve those dates, 24th and 25th of February. Really looking forward to that. Then in June, we're going to have some case study time. So Patrick, do you want to give the same update you gave at Summit about a potential platform or not right now?
I'll give a little bit. I don't really want to talk about it until it's done, because I've mentioned things in the past, and and this I'll go back to training, right? Where if you look at, again, all the innovation that's taking place in the technology space, just watch that, Mark Zuckerberg presentation. It's unreal how quickly they can evolve, how quickly they can produce. And most of them have a version of what's called Scrum. Scrum is a term in rugby, but the idea is that they're making incremental progress really quickly. And the nature of how how all technology businesses work is essentially sprint, right, for a period of time, and then recover, evaluate, and then train based on the evaluation, and then go back and sprint, right? It's the nature of, I would say, human performance, again, going to professional athletes. So I've learned the lesson where if you take a traditional business and try to do technology with that traditional business, it's not going to work. And I've lost lots of money, or I've paid an enormous price to learn some pretty valuable lessons, because I see a huge opportunity in the financial technology space that just is not being met with the current fintech platforms, whether it's Money Guide Pro or Money 360. There's like about a dozen platforms that hold that space, and none of them come from they come from more of a technology as opposed to the financial advisor's perspective and client's perspective. So I won't go more into that, but we're in the process. We've dedicated a lot of resources and a long-term, over a year commitment with a group out of San Jose, California, and version 1's looking awesome. We're hoping to have some of the fact finding and financial questionnaire stuff done by the end of the year to be testing. And then from there, we have a lot of I have a lot of different things I'd like to do. So I'll leave it at that. But all of it, is essentially like most of the other resources that, I have access to is shared with PEM, either through podcasts or the webinars or Summit. So, yep. So I'll keep everyone posted.
We're looking forward to it. So what will be valuable about that come June, assuming that Patrick's able to pull off what he's working on, is that it will give us a single way to look at somebody's personal financial environment. Whereas right now, somebody's doing it on one piece, somebody's doing it on a 40-page Excel spreadsheet, somebody else doing it on some other piece, somebody's using Truth Concepts Asset Flow. There's all these various ways to look at an individual or a family's personal financial arena, if you will, the whole thing. And so it's been very difficult for us inside our PM community to create any kind of case study environment because everybody looks at people's finances with a different lens or with a different format or different software or what have you. If we can find a single way to do that that's effective not only for the client whom we serve, but also valuable for the advisor, then we can do a better job with case studies. And so the June summit is only going to be live. There's a chance we might do some video or virtual something, but our current intention is that it is only for those that want to come to Salt Lake City and roll up their sleeves and get immersed in case study work. And ideally, the bulk of those case studies will have the same lens of this approach that Patrick is speaking of. So that'll give us February, March, April, May time to develop some clientele through this process and then come together in June and all work on case studies together in a mastermind format. I am going to think that the dates are going to include dinner the 22nd of June, and then the 23rd and 24th. It will probably be in Salt Lake City. What I would like you to do is mark your calendars for the 22nd to the 24th of June. Then our intention, and we have not worked this out yet, but our intention is to then go on up to Park City for the weekend. So maybe we do like a dinner the night of the 24th in Park City. And that way families could come, we could have a more social environment, hang out for the weekend. You all could stay, but it's going to be a a la carte environment. So you could come for just the case study. If you come to Park City, our current intention is that there's not a room block or anything else. You can stay at any hotel you want. You're just in Park City for the weekend, as are we. And if you want to come hang out with us, we're there. So that's our current thinking for June. And I'd love any feedback or requests or commentary or thoughts as we navigate this landscape with the challenges of Airbnb and COVID restrictions and everything else around events. But that is our current thinking. Patrick, Todd, anything else before I go on to the next October?
Just real quick, I was just going to tie in something you said about the point of the case study and some other pieces. And it really relates back to where we're going with the next webinars as well. And that is the idea between strategy and product. And this also feeds back to the whole idea. And that's where people are left with, getting persuaded by advertising that says tax-free income from your life insurance policy and those kind of things. There's no strategy around it. The product is one thing, and it's important. We've got to know how the product works, but we've got to be able to step back and put that into the best strategy. Could we take income from our life insurance policy? Absolutely. But is it the best in light of what's going on? It's not that we can't do it. We don't want to tell our clients we can't do it, but what we need to be prepared to do is put a strategy together that says, look what happens. We could pull this out and it's going to be a whole lot less money and you're going to end up with less at the end. Or we could use that knowing it was going to be there, have more income along the way, and still have this to protect on the backside. So it's about the strategy, not the product. And I think that's really where we're going.
Yep, well said. So as we finalize here, just in 2 more minutes, the October summit is going to be field speakers. And Vince Dodona said it well yesterday. It's rare that a speaker, whether virtual or in person, can impart information that is transferable. And thank you, Janet Sims, for picking that up. So we're going to be on the lookout between now and October. So the dates are October 27th and 28th. It will be virtual. And we're going to be looking for field speakers. So like last October, we had about 15 expert speakers. This October, we're going to have all field speakers, and they're going to be sharing with us the use of the 7 frameworks of the prosperity economics movement. So we'll get into in time delineating those frameworks. Again, we know what the 7 are. We've shared them with you in pieces and parts, but we'll make sure that we're clear on them. And we'll be looking for examples of people that are using those frameworks, proving them on a daily basis in their practices, and wanting to share that information with our community. use Janet's email, janet@pem.email. If one of you would pop that in the chat box, that would be awesome. If you feel like you have something that's transferable that you would like to share, but keep in mind that we're going to be wanting to narrow it to something like parallel paths or the visioneering platform or the advisor journey or your client story or what have you. So those frameworks, we'll get clear on what those are to you. And then we'll be looking for people that are actually using them and want to share their example. So with that, I think we're a wrap. Patrick, last words?
Nope.
Todd?
No last words.
Looking forward to the future.
All right. Much appreciation to all of you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you so much for joining us today. Keep doing good.